She was hours away from signing away control of a legacy she never asked for, but faithfully carried. A fortune wrapped in factories, land, and a portfolio that business pages loved to gossip about. She told herself love meant pulling down every wall, and she was ready to slide the papers across the polished table until a single overheard moment forced the truth to step into the light. Betrayal, the kind that wears a familiar smile, seldom arrives with thunder. It drifts in quietly and rearranges the furniture of your life while you are pouring tea. Caroline Mercer woke to the smell of cardamom coffee and the soft percussion of rain along the balcony outside her Savannah townhouse. Evan Cross, her husband of 3 years, stood in the kitchen in rolled shirt sleeves, a white dish towel over his shoulder, performing breakfast like a man who loved ritual. When he saw her, he raised a mug mixed exactly as she liked. 1 splash of cream, no sugar. "Morning, son," he said, and the word landed warm and convincing. She smiled, brushing sleep from her eyes. "Big day," he added, setting down a plate whose symmetry suggested care. "It's only paper," she said. "Paper that says we're one." He kissed her forehead. "Then let the paper say what's already true." Her phone vibrated. A message from Tessa Grant, the friend who had survived both college and heartbreak with her. "Are you absolutely sure? Call me." Caroline typed back, "I'm sure. Love is simpler than lawyers." Another ping. "Simpler isn't safer. Promise you'll think twice." She set the phone down. Evan watched without comment, then tapped the plate. "Tessa worries because that's her brand," he said gently. "We'll make this boring for her." After breakfast, Caroline's mother called. Florence Mercer kept schedules with a general's neatness and loved her daughter with a tenderness that never lost its spine. "Lena," she said, only her mother used the childhood name, "is today the day?" "Yes, Mama." The pause was brief but full. "A joint trust says we without handing away you," Florence offered. "Love doesn't require blindfolds." "I don't want walls," Caroline said. "I want a clean line between us and everyone else." "Then read every line twice," her mother replied. "Trust looks and still chooses." Belle Hartridge smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. Attorney Nora Bell, silver-haired and precise, guided them into a conference room where a stack of documents waited like a small white cliff. "Mrs. Cross," she said with measured care, "these instruments assign control of the Mercer Holding Company, voting interests, and accounts to your spouse. I am obligated to ask plainly, is this your decision freely made?" "Yes," Caroline answered. Evan's posture was patient. His eyes shone with modest pride. "You understand," Nora continued, "that this consolidates authority, cash management, board votes, execution rights." "I do," Caroline said. Nora slid her a pen. "There is no race here," the lawyer added. "Time is your friend." The first pages were signatures and initials, a steady rhythm. Midway through, Caroline's phone vibrated again. "Tessa." Caroline excused herself and stepped into the corridor, where a vase of magnolias perfumed the air like a soft warning. "Don't sign," Tessa whispered the moment the line connected. "I dreamed you were in a room where all the doors were painted on. It sounds dramatic, but I woke up sick." "It's just paper," Caroline tried. "Paper becomes doors," Tessa said. "Promise you'll think, not just feel." Through the glass wall, Caroline saw Evan waiting with perfect patience, scrolling his phone. "I'll think," she said. "I promise." She returned and set the pen down. "Tomorrow," she said quietly. "I want one more night." Evan's eyes widened, then cooled into a supportive smile. "Of course," he said. Nora Bell's mouth relaxed a fraction. "Wise," she murmured. "I'll hold everything as is." That evening, Evan turned to dinner and to theater. He seared salmon, lit 2 candles, cued an Otis Redding record. He teased her about reading biographies back to front. She teased him about straightening every crooked frame in every room he entered. Later, he said he needed to take a work call in the study, something about the boutique architecture firm where he consulted. 10 minutes, he promised. Make tea. I'll be right back. The kettle clicked off. Caroline remembered her honey was in the study drawer. She padded down the hall, the door mostly closed, a sliver of light cutting the darker corridor. She reached for the handle and froze at the sound of Evan's voice. The voice was his, the tone was not. Flatter, colder. She stalled today, he said. Tomorrow she'll sign. Nora's cautious, not suspicious. A second voice tinny through the speaker. Timeline after that? Evan's answer came smooth. We route the cash first, then shift the votes. Accounts will move offshore through the shells we built. By the time she blinks, the board will be mine. The second voice chuckled. And her? She thinks love is a blank check, Evan said, amused. She'll thank me for protecting her. The words moved through the door like cold air. Caroline's body went numb from the inside out. The honey jar in the drawer, the 2 candles, the crooked frame he had straightened. Everything rearranged itself into a scene she hadn't realized she was in. The kettle clicked loudly in the kitchen. Evan paused. Hold on, he said into the phone. His footsteps approached. Caroline stepped back into shadow, breath caught. The door opened wider. He glanced down the hall, waited, then shut the door. Just the kettle, he said to the unseen voice. We're fine. She stood in the dark and let the new map of her life settle. When she could move, she poured tea, watched the leaves whirl, and made a choice that hurt and steadied at the same time. She would not explode. She would act. At dawn, she told Evan, I want to speak to Nora alone before we sign. He hesitated, the first hairline crack, then smiled. Whatever makes you comfortable. Nora Bell read faces for a living. When Caroline arrived early and closed the door, Nora took off her glasses and listened without interrupting. All right, she said when the story was finished. We do not confront. We protect you as though he already suspects we know. We will restructure. On the surface, it will appear to hand him control. In truth, it will require dual authorization, trustee oversight, and clawback triggers for any unusual transfers. He will see what he wants to see. And if he pushes past the surface? Caroline asked. Then time and paper will be ready, Nora said. Trusts can be armor when they're written by someone who remembers why armor exists. Before the restructured signing, Nora walked Caroline through the plan with the patience of a teacher who knows panic hides in smart students. She drew boxes and arrows on a yellow legal pad. This trust, she said, tapping the largest rectangle, will appear to transfer management rights, but access to cash requires 2 keys, yours and a trustee's. Think of it as a vault with a chorus of locks. If any sum larger than routine payroll tries to leave, alarms ring. Caroline nodded, then asked the question she feared revealed softness. If something happens to me, can the board still move in an emergency? Nora smiled at the plane crash metaphor that advisors use when speaking plainly. You can. A reserved powers clause. You don't want to use it unless necessary. It spooks boards. But it sits here, quiet, waiting. Caroline exhaled. And the parts he thinks he understands? We leave them, Nora said. The trap works because it looks like the thing it imitates. During the hour before Evan arrived, Carolyn walked the hallway and studied the framed photographs. Ribbon cuttings from a decade ago, a grainy image of Nora as a young associate, a black and white portrait of Bell Hartridge's founders in suits too big for them. Responsibility can feel like a room you step into and discover your name already on the chair. She touched the glass of one frame and whispered, "Be steady," as if steadiness were a person she could invite to meet her at the table. Evan entered a few minutes later, bringing charming weather with him, compliments for the receptionist, a handshake for a junior associate, a smile that had worked hard and learned its lines. "Ready?" he asked. "Page by page," Caroline said. Nora narrated each section. Clauses that looked familiar now faced different directions. Permissions carried counterweights. The pen moved when Nora said move. Evan nodded with half attention, his focus forever angling toward the last page. "Cold feet?" he teased once. "Warm head," Caroline answered. He laughed, missed the meaning, and leaned forward to watch her sign. Afterward, Evan drove them home through rain-glossed streets and talked about steak reservations and a future week in Sonoma. Caroline watched the live oaks pass like sentinels and said, "That sounds nice," because some sentences exist to keep other sentences from happening. That night he brought home champagne and truffles. He toasted to us, and she answered to health and wisdom, and his eyebrow twitched at the second word. He took a late shower, then slid into bed smelling of cedar and soap. "Everything's about to get easier," he murmured. She stared at the ceiling and imagined gears clicking behind walls. Morning broke like a clean sheet. Evan checked his watch. "Busy day. First transfers are always a mess. I'll keep you posted." He left. Nora's text arrived. "Compliance nets are set. If he moves $1, we'll see the ripple. Stay steady." Caroline replied, "I'm steady." At midday, passing Evan's home office, she heard the colder voice again. "First tranche out by 11, another by morning." She signed. "I've got her codes. Auditors will be yawning when this is finished." A second voice asked about authorizations. "Don't be dramatic," Evan said. "By the time anyone looks up, the current will have changed." Caroline kept walking and let the recorder Nora had arranged do its quiet work. By late afternoon, Nora called. "We have what we need," she said. "Transfers attempted, approvals requested, the choreography captured with timestamps. We'll need you both at the office in the morning. Tell him it's routine. One last reconciling review." "Will it end quietly?" Caroline asked. "It will end firmly," Nora said. Over breakfast, Caroline said, "Nora wants us to stop by. Routine review before filing." Evan frowned, then shrugged. "One last hoop," he said. After that, no hoops. He was almost giddy in the car. "When this is done, Sonoma, or a lake house, I'll teach you to cast without tangling the line." "We'll see," she said, and folded her hands so he wouldn't see them shake. At Bell Hartridge, the same conference room waited, but the air felt different. Nora sat at the head. Two others were present, one from the bank's fraud unit, another from state financial enforcement, expressions neutral as needles. Evan's smile faltered, then recovered. "Quite an audience," he joked. "Procedure," Nora said. "We'll play a few recordings for the file and confirm signatures." Evan's laugh fell flat. "Recordings?" Nora pressed a button. Evan's voice filled the room, his real voice stripped of charm. "Once she signs, we route it offshore. She thinks love is a blank check." The second voice asked about shells. Evan's answer was patient and damning. He stared at the speaker, then at Nora, then at Caroline. "You bugged my office?" he said, outrage thrown on like a coat. Nora folded her hands. "An associate of yours recorded what he understood to be a plan to misappropriate funds. The accounts you tried to move were flagged automatically. We have call logs, attempted transfers, and approvals you do not have the right to use." Evan turned to Caroline. "You know me," he pleaded. "I wouldn't hurt you." She held his gaze. "I heard you," she said. "I trusted you, then I read the paper twice." The bank officer slid a folder across the table. Attempted transfers, approval requests, a timeline that matched the voice. The state official summarized the charges that might follow: fraud, attempted theft, falsified authorizations. It sounded clinical. It was personal. Two officers in suits entered quietly and read rights with practiced gravity. Evan reached for Caroline's hand, habit more than hope. She did not move. "Caroline, please," he begged as the cuff clicked. "We can fix this." "You tried to make me small," she answered. "I chose to become precise." They led him away. The door shut. Paper settled. Someone exhaled. Outside, cameras waited. Wealth attracts press the way light attracts moths. A reporter called, "Mrs. Cross, did you know?" Caroline paused on the steps. Trust shouldn't be blind. she said. It should wear glasses and read the contract. The line traveled farther than she expected. That night, the house felt both safer and emptier. Caroline sat with a legal pad and made lists the way grief demands. Call the board, appoint interim director, review vendor ethics, create scholarship in mom's name. Send Tessa flowers. What she didn't write but understood. Grieve the man she imagined, not the man who wore his face. Florence arrived in the morning and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, the way older mothers say 3 things at once. I'm sorry, I'm proud, I am here. You saw, Florence said. I did, Caroline replied. It hurt. It will and then it won't, Florence said. Pain has a schedule. We don't control it, but we do choose chairs while we wait. Caroline learned to choose better chairs. She met line workers at the smallest factories, walked warehouse floors her father had once walked, listened to people talk about shipping bottlenecks and childcare gaps and how a good supervisor can bless a shift. She asked the accountants to teach her the unglamorous bones of the business. She stopped treating the inheritance like a museum and started treating it like a town that had to keep its lights on. One afternoon, she visited the cooperative's oldest facility, a brick building 2 towns over where fans thrummed and a radio played low near a line supervisor's desk. My father brought me here when I was 8, she told the supervisor, a patient man named Luis Alvarez. I complained about the noise. He said it was the sound of rent and school shoes. Luis grinned. Still is, he said, then grew serious. Whatever happened in the papers, that's above my pay grade. Down here what matters is that bobbins spin, checks clear, and folks make it home for dinner. They talked about a daycare stipend that would keep skilled workers from leaving. They mapped a pilot on scrap paper right there on the break room table. Wisdom sometimes looks like 3 people with coffee cups drawing boxes around problems until the boxes become doors. Late one evening, when the house's quiet felt too large, Tessa texted, Can I call? Caroline typed, Please do. The call came a second later. I keep thinking about the dream, Tessa said. Painted on doors. You ever wonder how many times we've walked into those? Caroline laughed softly. Enough to recognize the brushstrokes, she said, but this time I had someone to shout from the other side. Always, Tessa said. We keep ladders for each other. When the call ended, Caroline set the phone down and felt the steadiness that arrives when you realize you were not alone even in the worst room. You who are listening know something about those ladders, how a friend's warning, a parent's stubborn wisdom, a clerk's quiet honesty, can be the rung you reach when the floor gives way. On the day restitution checks began arriving months later, Caroline sat with Nora to review a final report. You were careful, Nora said. That's what saves people. Careful before brave, whenever possible. Caroline considered the phrasing. Careful before brave, she repeated. That's a motto. It fits on a mug, Nora allowed, and they both laughed for the first time in a long time about anything connected to the case. The story did not end with the courtroom or the boardroom. It ended in quieter places. The porch steps where Caroline tied her sneakers before dawn walks. The empty guest room she turned into a study. The worn pew she returned to on Sundays not because answers were guaranteed but because silence there seemed clean. She learned to cook for one without measuring portions, as if a second plate might appear. She learned to feel the difference between loneliness and peace. If you've listened this far, thanks. Stories live when we hand them to one another. That's how caution becomes wisdom, and wisdom becomes care. Hold that thought for someone who needs it. Months later, a letter arrived from the state prosecutor. Evan pled to lesser charges in exchange for cooperation against a mentor who had taught him the ladder of shells. Restitution ordered, prohibition on fiduciary roles. Not decades in prison, but a narrowed life. Endings often look ordinary compared to the fury that preceded them. Wisdom is learning how to live with that ordinariness. Caroline walked one evening along the riverfront, where street musicians tuned guitars and couples argued gently over gelato. Tessa joined with coffee. "How's your room of doors?" Tessa asked. Caroline smiled. "They're real now," she said. "Some open, some stay closed. I know the difference." At the Mercer Foundation's annual meeting that fall, Caroline spoke under soft lights to employees, board members, scholarship recipients, and a few journalists who still found the story instructive. "We are not our balance sheet," she said. "We are the promises we keep when no one is looking. This year we'll add an ethics clause to every vendor contract and double our scholarships for nurses and welders." Applause rose like a clean wind. Nora Bell found her afterward. "You did what needed doing," she said. Caroline squeezed her hand. "You gave time a job," she replied. "I just let it work." There is a temptation, especially when young, to imagine love alone can transfigure character. Midlife teaches a different lesson. Love invites, it does not alchemize. Under pressure, Evan reached for shortcuts and shadows. Under pressure, Caroline reached for counsel and light. That is not a fairy tale moral, it is a blueprint. Around Thanksgiving, Caroline and Florence opened dusty attic boxes and found a ledger from the earliest days of Mercer Textile Cooperative. In the margin of the first page, her grandfather had written, "Never sign what you haven't read twice. Never love what won't love you back." They laughed at the bluntness and agreed the sentence would make a good poster for the break room. That night at the old kitchen table, Caroline said, "I thought giving everything would prove I wasn't my father. He locked things." Florence stirred her tea. "Your father locked things because he learned the cost of unlocked rooms in a hard era," she said. "We both made mistakes. We also built something that still feeds families. Love didn't need you to give everything. It needed you to give wisely." On a winter morning, half a year later, Caroline crossed the lobby of a hospital wing her family's foundation had funded and paused at a plaque. She traced her parents' names, then made a note to add a nurse scholarship fund. A teenage volunteer said shyly, "Thank you for this place." "We built it together," Caroline answered. "My name is just one of many." Evan existed somewhere else by then, under a smaller sky. He worked a job that did not let him touch other people's money. He sent an apology through counsel that read more like a ledger than a confession. Caroline felt only the gentle dullness that replaces pain when it has done its work. Closure is not spectacle. It is paperwork and a quiet sigh. If you are new here, welcome. If you're a regular, you know what comes next. Tell us where you're listening from. City, state, a lesson you'd offer your younger self. Subscribe if these stories help you hold a lantern in your own rooms. We make them to steady hands, not to point fingers. Caroline did not become a different person after betrayal. She became more precisely herself. She learned the arithmetic of trust. She kept the tenderness that made her offer the pen in the first place, and added the backbone that let her set it down until the contract honored both her heart and her future. She lost a husband and found a steadier life. She lost an illusion and gained a lens. As the year turned, she stood on the balcony where rain once tapped like a metronome and poured 2 cups of cardamom coffee, one for memory and one for the morning. She lifted the second cup and stepped into the light. We'll leave you with this. When betrayal speaks in a familiar voice, you don't owe it your hearing. When a contract asks for closed eyes, open them wider. And when you sign, sign in ink and wisdom both. Until next time, take care of your heart and your ledger in equal measure.